lame ones are in their departments. We want names and identified positions, okay? Tell us who the political commissars in the office that have protected and they don't have to show up for work. Tell us where the waste and fraud is, okay, and the abuse. You tell us all that. We promise you anonymity. All right, we will work with our good state employees, and most of them are good state employees, and they want to do their jobs, and their morale is wrecked by these parasites that lay on our state government. Now, they got 60 days. As I said, they want to meet, fine, I'll meet with them. But on March 31st, we don't have a budget. I'm not signing an extender except for public safety and health. That's it. The rest of the government shuts down, and it's on their back. All right, and we'll see whose bluff holds. I don't bluff. Now, they finally hand me a budget. They can delete from my budget anything they want. They can get rid of my entire staff. Okay? Anything they add back into that budget is a separate bill under the Constitution, a separate line item. Just as you saw Patterson veto 6,700 bills. Okay? I can veto anything they try to add back in. Then takes 2/3 of each house, both houses, okay, to vote on an override to overturn my budget. If they don't override, and all I need is 1/3 plus 1, which I will have in the Republican Senate, all right? If not, also in the Assembly this year. If we gain 9 seats in the Assembly, the Republicans take 9 seats, we will have 1/3 plus 1 in that house also, and that's the end of it. That's the end of the nonsense, okay, with the spending in the state of New York. And in that period of time, we will restructure our government. We'll go to the first step. After that, we're going to learn. We're going to send teams out to every department. We're going to send industrial engineers who can go in and evaluate how a department functions, what its mission is, its efficiency, its cost productivity, and its necessity. And if it's unnecessary, like the Adirondacks Association or the Southern Manhattan Development Agency. What do? I haven't been able to find out, but I saw them in the list and I tried to look them up. All right? The reality is that you have to accept that you've been conditioned your entire life to think that the way this government functions today is the way the Constitution provides for it to function. It's not. And yes, I am going there as a lawyer with a legal history, with a management history. Right? I look at the people and they say, you just have to believe that we can do things differently. You've got to be a believer, and you got to stick with me, all right? Because I'm with you. All right, you're my baseball bat, and with transparency and the spotlight, we're going to take them down. Right. I don't have.
We have a follow-up questions here. If anyone has a question, please write it down, pass it forward, and I'll be happy to answer it. The questions that are being asked in this room are the questions that were asked by everyone in this room. And folks, Cheryl has invited every Democrat in every race in this area, and not one of them has had the balls to show up. Right on. Huh? I'm talking about the candidates, not very proud here. And we have Democrats in our group, by the way. Okay, David, I have a question for you. Please justify why we must spend $720 billion in 2011 beyond the 2 wars for our troops to remain in 135 different countries.
We can't. And we shouldn't have them in those countries. You know, they stay because the military is, the Pentagon, I agree with Carl's point that we are protected by brave men and women in uniform in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in other countries. But the Pentagon is a bureaucracy like others, and they haven't reviewed which countries they can bring troops home from. And they do, it's not only those troops around the world, that are very expensive to maintain and in many spots are unnecessary. But it's the way they do their procurement. Remember, one problem, part of that $700 billion extra is because the Pentagon submits a budget to Congress, and then every member gets like a free free shot at the budget to add things they want in their own home districts and states. So a lot of the excess spending that's out of the that's called the military is really earmarks coming out of Congress. So I think the questioner is right. We should look through every part of the federal budget. It's just like Carl was talking about on the New York State budget. There's waste in lots of places, including the Pentagon, that needs to be downsized. I worked at the State Department. I can tell you chapter and verse of the waste that's going on around the world out of the State Department. We spent, the U.S. taxpayers spent over $1 billion rebuilding Nicaragua after the Soviets, it was in the Cold War, just to see Nicaragua become communist again as it is right now under Hugo Chavez. He's the controller of Daniel Ortega. So it's in every part of the budget there's this wastage.
Okay, Carl. I'm not sure about this question. I'm going to ask it, and it may be two questions rolled into one, but I'm not sure, so I'm going to ask it this way. I signed Paladino's petition, but truthfully, I had some concern about his stance on education. I was a member of LMCS Budget Committee this past year, got my hands on some very interesting state budget information. For Carl Paladino, will you attempt to make New York a right-to-work state? I'm not sure if those are two questions or one question. So I think the question is about your concern on education, and the right-to-work state is the second question, but I was a little bumfuzzled by the Budget Committee.
We're an at-will state right now. I don't see any reason. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't see any reason to have a right to work in the state of New York. We have to get away from socialist tendencies and get into individual rights. And the individual rights are digress so much from those of other states. New York State is sort of looked at as being a socialistic type of state. They figure we're just this side of Massachusetts when it comes to the liberal and progressive attitudes. If we're going to encourage business development and expansion of our businesses, we're going to have to lighten up on the restrictions. We're going to have to certainly stop the nonsense. The human rights claims against these businesses are debilitating. We've let it go too far, and we have to stop it. We got to stop this over-regulation. We got to stop this intrusiveness that we're going to tell a businessman how to run his business. I just got done arguing yesterday in the city of Buffalo before the press, actually, over what they call a community benefits agreement. They're trying to force a large project at the foot of Main Street that involves city-owned land to adopt a community benefits agreement where they're going to tell HSBC Bank and Bass Pro and some other retailers that they have to pay a living wage. Now, a hot dog stand that pays its people minimum wage is a business, and it has to compete with other businesses of that nature, which pay their people similar wages, and they charge accordingly, and they earn a profit. You can't tell a business that they have to pay their people $3 more an hour. You can't tell them that. They're just not going to come to that location. And that's the argument that the development people are making. They're saying, this is wrong. You can't tell a business, you will discourage businesses from growing here, from starting here, from expanding here. And that's where this stuff has to stop. So I draw a line in the sand and say no.
Okay. David, what has been the most difficult decision that you've had to make in your life? Interesting question.
Well, an easy answer I'll give you is to run here for office. I've never run before. It's throwing my family into turmoil. It's costing money. I'm away from the family, which I'm not used to being. It's disrupted my business, and yet it had to be done. You know, I struggled with it, but we are in such dire straits and there weren't people standing up to say, look, I have the backbone to go to Washington and protect New York and work for the people of New York. There weren't people, you know, there weren't really credible candidates on the Republican side, and I felt I had to do it. Talked with my wife, and I guess that was the hardest thing to do, was to convince her that it would be okay. So I'm doing it.